The notion that the science on climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is a misconception that has been perpetuated by some groups. This idea is often rooted in the belief that climate change is a plot to control people's lives, particularly those of Christians, and to undermine their values. However, this claim is not supported by scientific evidence and is, in fact, a misunderstanding of the scientific consensus on climate change. Firstly, the overwhelming majority of climate scientists agree that human activities, such as burning fossil fuels and deforestation, are significantly contributing to the increase in global temperatures. This consensus is based on decades of research and is supported by multiple lines of evidence, including temperature records, melting of glaciers, and shifts in the distribution of plants and animals. The scientific community has thoroughly examined the data and has concluded that climate change is real and primarily caused by human activities. Moreover, the idea that climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is often based on a misunderstanding of the relationship between science and religion. Many Christians believe that taking care of the environment is a moral and spiritual imperative, and that addressing climate change is a way to fulfill the faith's teachings on stewardship and creation care. In fact, many Christian denominations and organizations have issued statements and taken actions to address climate change, recognizing its impact on the poor, the vulnerable, and the planet as a whole. Another argument made by those who claim that climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is that it is a plot to impose a one-world government or to restrict individual freedoms. However, this claim is unfounded and conspiratorial. The reality is that addressing climate change requires a global response, as it is a global problem that affects all countries and peoples. International cooperation and agreements, such as the Paris Agreement, are necessary to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate the worst effects of climate change. It is also worth noting that the scientific community is not a monolithic entity, and scientists from diverse backgrounds and perspectives are involved in climate change research. The process of scientific inquiry is designed to be self-correcting, with researchers continually testing and refining their theories and hypotheses. The fact that there is a broad consensus among climate scientists on the reality and causes of climate change is a testament to the strength of the evidence and the rigor of the scientific process. In addition, the claim that climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is often linked to the idea that environmentalism is a form of paganism or idolatry. However, this is a misrepresentation of the biblical teachings on creation care and stewardship. Many Christian theologians and scholars argue that caring for the environment is a fundamental aspect of Christian discipleship, and that it is rooted in biblical principles such as the Domain mandate in Genesis 1:28 and the Great Commandment to love God and neighbor in Mark 12:30-31. Finally, it is essential to recognize that climate change is not just an environmental issue, but also a social justice issue. The impacts of climate change, such as more frequent and severe weather events, droughts, and sea level rise, disproportionately affect the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. Addressing climate change is a matter of justice, compassion, and love for one's neighbors, which are core Christian values. In conclusion, the notion that the science on climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is a misconception that is not supported by scientific evidence. The overwhelming consensus among climate scientists is that human activities are causing the Earth's temperature to rise, and that this has significant consequences for the environment, human health, and the economy. Rather than being a plot to manipulate Christians, addressing climate change is a moral and spiritual imperative that requires a global response and cooperation among people of all faiths and backgrounds.